All right, so a very warm welcome. I'm super excited to welcome you to our LEAP webinar today, deciding on the right resource management model, centralized, decentralized, or hybrid. My name is Nora, and I'm excited to be your host for today as a transformation consultant and someone very passionate about the future of work. I help organizations rethink how they operate by bringing together insights from agile ways of working, behavioral science, and human-centered design. My purpose is to make the way we work more adaptable, inclusive, and meaningful, and resource management plays a huge role in that. Today, we'll dig into the right resource management model that can empower you and your team to unlock better outcomes across the board. And I would invite you to warm up with a quick audience poll. So Edom, feel free to launch a poll. We are wondering, which resource management model does your organization currently use? It might be centralized. One team oversees the resource planning across the organization. It might be decentralized, each department or team managing its own resources, or a hybrid mix of centralized and decentralized. Or you're not very sure. In that case, no worries. You can also hit that one. And we'll give it a few moments. And Edom, feel free to close the poll to see how our audience is doing in this regard. Wonderful. So we've got a tie, actually, which is really interesting. 45% of you are working in a centralized resource management model, and also 45%, the same amount of people, in a hybrid one. Only 9% operate in a decentralized one. So that's really interesting. We really, really hope, no matter which model you currently operate in, that this discussion will be super valuable for you, as we'll really be sharing from our very own lived experience. All three wonderful panelists today have experienced all three models. So we hope there is something in our discussion for everyone. This webinar is part of RUN's webinar series called LEAP, Igniting the Future of Resource Management. At RUN, we believe resource management is so much more than just schedules and spreadsheets. It's about creating smarter and more human-centered ways of working. With LEAP, our goal is to challenge traditional approaches, spark fresh ideas, and bring inspiring new perspectives to the resource management community. Together, we'll be exploring what that future of resource management could and should look like. We will be using the last 15 minutes for questions and answers. So as we are discussing our topic today, feel free to listen closely, capture any questions you might have in the Q&A section of Zoom webinar, and we will make sure to answer them at the end of our session. Also, if you feel like sharing any thoughts and reflections, feel free to use the chat. We always love to hear from you. All right, so let's meet today's speakers, the three resource management leaders who've walked the walk and bring perspectives across different industries. And this very panel, I'm super proud, has been on the LEAP stage in January, and they were just too good not to come back a second time. So here's the first one. Sid Mills is the Professional Services Strategy and Operations Manager at Instructure. With over a decade of experience in resource management across sectors like tech, healthcare, and education, she's all about turning complexity into clarity. And Sid, I'm so happy to have you back on the LEAP stage. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Nora. So happy to be back.
Awesome. And next up, we've got Nikki Cherpak, Manager of Resource Planning Analysis at Essentra Health, bringing deep expertise in staffing, implementation, and strategic operations across healthcare and consumer goods. She's very passionate about building high-performing, scalable teams. And Nikki, thank you so much for joining us again. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Nora.
Nice. And finally, last but not least, we've got Andrea Davis, founder and CEO of Linked Workforce. Andrea has led workforce transformations for over 16 years by now, with a focus on resource management tech, data agility, and inclusive leadership. She's a force in shaping workforce strategies for the future. And I'm super excited to share with everyone here today that she will be launching an e-learning platform for resource management professionals in fall 2025. So huge congratulations. We're so excited for you. Available both in English and Spanish. So make sure to connect to Andrea and get to know more about that wonderful program she's launching. So Andrea, welcome to our stage. Super excited to have you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for the plug. I appreciate it. I'm so excited to be here. So thank you.
Cool. So we have the pleasure of spending the next hour diving into this phenomenal topic of the resource management models. And I really want to kick things off by asking the very question of why. Why does it actually matter to think about the different models? What is the impact the resource management model has on an organization? And Sid, I would invite you to kick us off. Why does it matter to talk about this?
Sure, sure. Knowing that there's the three different models, it actually sets up the teams differently to handle the workflow. So I really see it as an exercise in how you're going to delve into process around resourcing, which brings up efficiency as well. It also really matters to how you're going to view your business. So, what kind of inputs are you wanting to get from resource management and that function, as well as taking care of your people, making sure that your people are in the right place at the right time for the work that needs to be done. So, I feel like it's a really important topic.
Very nice. Thank you so much for kicking us off. That was beautiful. Andrea, what would you add? Why do you care about the resource management models?
Yeah, I think, it's important factor in how the culture of resource management at an organization. I would say if you think about what role resource management plays, being decentralized or hybrid or centralized really plays into that and the impact that it has at the organization. So I would say from a cultural perspective and then from the impact, I think from both of those angles as well.
Nice, awesome. Nikki, now that the two of them already went, is there anything else that stands out to you? Why does it matter to you? Oh, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, is that better?
Yes,
Okay,
perfect.
sorry about that. I was saying it's hard to follow up after those two, but Sid mentioned the impact or the input to the values, but also it's important for the output. So, what is the organization looking to get from resource management,
Mhm.
as well as where's the strategy around the growth? So, depending on what the organization is looking to do to grow, it's really important to deep dive into which model would be the best for those outputs.
100%. And what is so fascinating about this topic, as the organization evolves and grows, so does the resource management function. So it's always a matter of really understanding the context, the business strategy, and how the resource management function can best support it. So it's always important to keep an eye out because things are evolving and dynamic, and so should the model be. So let's kick right into things and start off by really understanding the three models a bit more. So I'm going to share my screen again and let's walk through the different models. So we've got the centralized, hybrid, and decentralized. Let's start off with the centralized. And maybe what we could do is just what is it? And then we can dive into what are the pros and the cons. So I'm curious, Andrea, could you kick us off with the centralized? What is the centralized resource management model all about?
Sure. I would say for thinking about resource management maturity, the centralized model is probably the highest maturity in an organization. It's when you have an actual resource management function that operates independently and provides a service to their internal clients, which are the practitioners that they serve. So the goal of the centralized model is to really have what I would say is a non-biased function, right? That is really focused on the skill sets of the resources that they're staffing, also coupled with the demand and really making intelligent decisions based on what's best for the client. So that's what's happening in a centralized model. It's not one service line or practice is kind of doing one process one way and another is doing another way. It's the entire organization or firm is following the same resourcing processes with little nuances between practice areas, and then driving those processes for efficiency, productivity, and really to be, I mean, the bottom line is to serve the client in the best way possible, but also to have a positive impact for that employee as well.
Nice. Okay, thanks for laying the foundation. So the
Sure.
centralized model basically has the same processes, governance structures across the business with slight nuances. Nikki, from your lived experience, having been a resource manager in a centralized model, what were some of the benefits you could perceive?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, centralized.
You a little bit quiet?
I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. It was fine earlier. Sorry
You
about
got
that.
this, don't worry.
Uh, no, I mean, the benefits are truly that you have that, for lack of a better word, centralized person or people group that really works with not only external stakeholders, but internal as well. It really turns into this life cycle or ecosystem to be able to not only just look at the current projects and needs, but also see again where the organization is looking to go and grow, looking at the pipeline and really being able to work with like all of the organization's resources to make those streamlined decisions. So you're not just looking at just a resource to place here. It's really talking to HR, using skills, looking at the various skills. And really it turns into more of a proactive resourcing than a reactive resourcing. So as
Mm,
Sid mentioned before, you have that instead of that just-in-time resourcing, you really can look at the broader picture and make that determination to say, do we need to hire? Do we have the
mhm.
available resources or the right resources internally? Are there resources we can develop internally into those roles as well? So again, it's really people driven, and just having that broad view into the whole organization, not just a siloed perspective.
Yeah, yeah. So we can zoom out, we can see the big picture, and as a result, we can make decisions that really benefits the organization and not just the silo we're looking at. Amazing. Thanks so much, Nikki. Sid, what would you add? And also, once you've had a look at the pros, what are some of the cons you have experienced in the arena of resource management in a centralized model?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I think, both Andrea and Nikki hit the nail on the head with the pros. I would just highlight it's really a way to holistically look at the company. So instead of department by department, you're looking holistically at the entire company, which allows for more strategic growth and to really kind of move forward as a business. The cons, I would say, since it is, one team or one person sometimes managing all of this, there can be a delay in resourcing. There are definitely hoops that you have to jump through since it's a standardized process. You need to follow the process, and there can be delays in that. The other con that I've experienced is there can be a little bit of distance between you and the actual teams that you're resourcing. So you may need to have, extra meetings with managers or different departments to really know what their strategy is for their individual teams, since there is that piece of, being removed from that. But hopefully, having a good skills matrix will solve for that as well. But yeah, that's what I would add in.
Fantastic. Andrea, Nikki, any other cons that you have experienced that you would like to highlight?
I think for me, to build upon what Sid said, it's definitely a culture of trust.
Mhm.
So you really need to build trust within the organization in all stakeholders, really, not just the program teams or service lines. It's really building trust with your HR, with your talent acquisition team, with your business development team, because you really are that source, that one source, or your group is that one source that really makes those decisions. And a lot of times they want to be the decision maker, right? And so losing that responsibility could be tough. So I would say definitely need to build a culture of trust within the organization to have a truly functional centralized resourcing.
Fantastic. That's such an important point. Andrea, from your experience, what is one way of going about building trust as a resource manager inside your organization?
Yeah, I think this is so important. And I can't, like Nikki, I think I can't agree with you more because I think you'll actually fail if you try to go from decentralized to centralized and not have the support and engagement with your business stakeholders. I think it's actually a recipe for disaster. But I think one thing for success, to have a to really build up that centralized model is to have a plan to get there, right? Like it's not an overnight in 6 months, we're going to go from decentralized to centralized, but it's a pathway to get there. And I think the biggest thing is you can't be disconnected from the business. So even in the centralized model, you really have to be part of the processes, understand the pain points and be in it. I was joking with someone the other day and I said, most of your business as a resource manager should be having conversations. I mean, that is really the bulk of what we do. And if you don't like that part, that's probably not the right role for you.
Yeah, good point.
Because these conversations, in some conversations, and they're like, well, it's not productive. Well, some conversations are not productive, right? Like some are just getting to know someone and building that relationship, and that is productive in its own right. And so for me, I think to be successful, it's building those relationships, and to build trust, you have to have the conversations. That's the biggest thing. You have to build the relationship. You have to set aside, even if it's an hour, just to talk about each other's family or whatever that other person wants to talk about, to feel comfortable with you, to lead them into that next, phase of resource management maturity. But those relationships are invaluable. And I've only found success with doing that. If you try to skirt around that and just go straight to the centralized model, I think you really will lose respect for those that are coming along the journey with you. So I can't overestimate or over communicate the need to build relationships there.
Yes.
Mhm.
That's so well said. Thank you so much, Andrea. And it just reminds me of this is really the differentiating factor between us and AI is that we can build trust, we
Oh
can
my gosh,
have those
yes.
personal
Mhm.
connections. So it's really time to hone in on that, especially now with the technology, being on the rise. So thanks for outlining that, highlighting that. I completely agree. So now that we've talked about the centralized mode, and we've seen, its beautiful potential, as well as some watch outs and potential, barriers or pitfalls. Let's talk about the decentralized model. So you already pointed to the fact that usually there is a maturity evolution, and usually organizations start out in the decentralized model. So I'm really curious what this one looks like. And maybe, Nikki, could you kick us off by outlining what is the decentralized mode in comparison to the centralized one? What's different here?
Typically in decentralized,
And maybe again, mute and unmute.
I tried to stay off mute. Did that work?
Now
Sorry.
we hear
Um,
you.
so in decentralized, typically what I've seen is that there really is no resource management role at all. It
Mhm.
typically lies within that delivery team. So whether it's the service line managers or even the people managers, line managers, etc., they are the ones that are looking at the project work that is coming or being requested, and they are the ones making the decision to assign that team member, whomever it might be. With that, it's typically done just within that project team. So whether it's the project manager, right, that reaches out that says they need a need within a different service area or different client, it's all decided pretty much within that project or that program. So it's not looking really outside typically, unless there's truly a need that they can't resource. Usually then reaches out to talent acquisition. So you don't really have a visibility into the whole organization's capacity. They're just really looking at their team.
Yeah, right. Amazing. Thanks for laying the foundation of the decentralized mode. Sid, from your experience, what is good about this model? Is there any benefits to it?
Yeah, I do think that there is a place for decentralized, depending on industry and the size of the company. It may make sense to have a decentralized process for resource management. Also for newer companies, for startups, I've seen this quite often because the teams are smaller. There may be high turnover or higher turnover in those types of environments, and it's important for the line managers or delivery managers, people managers to really have a true understanding of their team. And then those people, then it makes sense for them to actually assign out their team. If they're looking at growth and development within the teams, they may have a greater understanding or deeper understanding of the career pathways for the group. So there is a close connection there with really understanding your team's skills and wants in the business, and assigning the right person. You may also have really complex projects and need, the right fit for those projects in a way that only the manager and that team would understand.
Mm,
So in that regard, I do think it has a place. But again, it is sort of removed from the holistic view of the organization. That delivery manager is only focused on their team and prioritizing their team. So that can have some downfalls if you're looking to really excel and grow the business in a strategic way.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. So let's really dive into the cons. Sid, maybe from your perspective, you already touched upon the scalability as not really an advantage of the decentralized
Yeah.
model. What else do you see is a challenge with this model?
Yeah, so as a resource manager in the past working in that kind of model, it became very, very confusing. It really shifted the role into, I don't want to say more of an admin function, but it felt that way because it was a very reactive place to be. You're just basically resourcing what comes to you, being told from someone else, but having to produce reports and things for the business without having that insight or deeper insight. So the cons are, for me, I feel that you're sort of stuck as a business without a true opportunity to really strategically change, shift, and grow. It works for the moment in time that you're in, but if you want to develop outside of that, it really requires a shift to do
Mm,
that.
absolutely nice. Andrea, what would you add, looking at the pros and cons of the decentralized model?
Yeah, and I think I agree with Sid. Like there's, at a less mature resource management model or you're just starting, it makes sense for decentralized to start just starting to get people in the flow of utilizing resource management makes perfect sense. I think as organizations begin to grow, it does become a pretty large con, specifically in being able to make business decisions using the data. And I always use the example of when we went through COVID, when there was a many organizations who had decentralized models, and it was kind of a mass panic because they didn't know who was on first, who's doing what, who's where. They didn't have that information in a way that they could use that to make business decisions where we need during a time where we needed to pivot very quickly. So it's extremely limiting, I would say, from and to Sid's point, from a scalability, but also it does not allow the business to have the information that it needs to make business decisions. And for your most expensive asset, people are the most expensive asset that any organization has. If you don't truly understand that as a whole and not in these choppy, ungoverned ways, you're not going to be able to have a true workforce plan to know when to hire and who to hire and what skill set. You won't be able to do that. You won't be able to fill in gaps when people take leave of absence or are out unexpectedly because you don't have that information to be able to go ahead and make those decisions. And you can't make, skills first decisions as well. So I think there's a lot of cons when it comes to the business growing. all have worked with for organizations that grow by acquisition. If you're bringing in an acquisition or a new organization, that's also a con, because they're now just going to bring in the processes that they're used to, and they'll never fully merge in with, that broader organization. And so it's a missed opportunity. So I would say for me, the decentralized model is a true con for any organization that has, 1,000 or more, or 800 or more, or professionals that they're trying to manage, because it really limits you from a business perspective and getting to the true essence of what resource management is there to do, and is to provide business insights to make decisions. So
Yeah, absolutely. Super with you. Well said. Thank you so much, Andrea. So I understand that it might make sense to kick off with the decentralized model, but listening to you, I get the sense that the ultimate goal is to mature the resource management function towards the centralized one. And I believe that the hybrid model might be a nice bridge between the decentralized and the centralized. So I'm really curious now to dive into the hybrid model. Nikki, could you kick us off? How would you describe this model? What happens here? Who is doing what? Oh no. The audio is not cooperating. It might be a
So
decentralized
sorry. Is that
model.
better?
Yeah.
All I've been doing is muting and unmuting. Okay, I'm sorry. Um,
All
so
good.
as you mentioned, the hybrid, it really is a great landing place if you are looking to take your model from decentralized to centralized. I think it's interesting that we saw that that was half and half, right, in the data poll, because I think a lot of organizations kind of land there and stick there sometimes, because it's hard to get to that next step of maturity to go decentralized. But basically, from my experience, when it's a hybrid model, you do have some sort of person or group managing the resource management data, whether it's managing capacity, whether it's in Excel or in a system, and also managing that demand planning. So really, they're looking at and producing that data, but it's still the resource decision and responsibility typically still lies within that program team or client or project team. So really, the resourcing role becomes more of that analysis perspective and providing the data and providing the information for those groups to make those decisions. Also, it becomes hard because you might have one role thinking they're accountable for the resourcing, but the
Mhm.
other thinking they're accountable as well. So sometimes to make a hybrid scenario work, you have to have really good governance and processes, and a really good RACI chart to spell out who is actually responsible for what, because there could be that conflict, and that who's actually responsible, who's making that decision. But with that RACI chart would be the way that that hybrid model would be
Mhm.
successful.
Nice. Awesome. You're not just sharing one of the challenges, shedding light on that, but also already offering a great way to go about it proactively. Thank you so much, Nikki. Sid, I'm super curious. What has your experience been in this hybrid model?
Yeah, this was actually the most difficult model for me to be in. I feel like you become sort of a liaison role, really. Um, you have this opportunity, to Andrea's point, to build trust, since you are delving into reporting and insights. You do have the opportunity to build trust within the organization to maybe get out of that hybrid hybrid model and transition into something different. But at the same time, I feel there can be a lot of weight on the resource manager's shoulders in this model, because you're still in this space of being removed from what's really happening. So you're speaking to insights that you aren't in from the beginning to end. You're really having to trust delivery managers or the project team in their decisions as well. So there's a lot of, from my perspective, a lot of communication. I think we spoke about this earlier. A lot of communication that needs to happen so that you can really understand where these decisions are coming from, with the teams that are making the decisions of resourcing, so that you can then speak to the insights and gain trust. So it was a little bit of a dance for me in this role. I did enjoy it for a bit because we moved from decentralized to hybrid. So it felt to me like I was getting into the seat of more strategy. I could talk to more points. So that was really positive, to kind of help build momentum to hopefully get to centralized. So.
Very, very nice. And I can see there are many questions coming in, which is awesome. Keep them coming. We love your questions. We'll dive into them shortly. Andrea, what is your perspective? I remember you sharing that this model is currently very popular. So I'm very keen also to pick your brain and experience on this one.
Yes, this is probably the number one model that is used with the clients that come to Linked Workforce, either if they're in decentralized or they're already in a hybrid type model, because I think Sid just said it exactly right. It allows the RM team to start creating that trust. You still have governance. So I think that's a really important piece. You still have governance from a reporting perspective. So you all should be still utilizing the same data. Shouldn't be so far off that, one part of the business is using something and the other is using something different. And so that you still have roll up and visibility as a full organization, which I think is truly powerful. So I think that's why it's popular, right? Because you get to the data to make the decisions. You get to a place where folks still feel like the business leaders still feel like they have a little control. They're still in the mix a bit, but they're starting to relinquish that to the RM team. And the other thing is, most of the folks who are in this hybrid model are recently, excuse me, using some type of new technology or enhancing their current technology and processes, right? So there is that transformation effort that's going on. So they want to get through that process before they fully go centralized. So I think that's why it's so popular right now. It's because that tech and process transformation is happening, and then the people transformation usually happens at the end of that process.
Amazing. And from your perspective, like, what is the best way to not get stuck in that
Yes. Yeah.
model?
You've got to have a North Star. I think and not just let that fade. And the other thing is you can't, you have to have a project plan of how you're going to get there, because I think where people get stuck is they're like, okay, we're doing this tech transformation, or we're doing process improvements. And then they're trying to do all the process improvements to get to ultimate maturity. And you never ever get there because your ending point keeps moving and keeps shifting. And that's the ultimate downfall of any transformation. It's what is like the phase one. This is what the business has committed to. We have agreed to. We're going to focus on this first. So then once we check that off, we can go to the phase two for the next enhancements. So I think that's the downfall I often see, is just
Mhm.
that moving target and you never get to the moving target. So having that clear expectation in place for that foundational or phase one before you go to the next level, I think is super important.
Very nice. Awesome. Have we missed anything important in regards to the three models before we look at the challenges of transitioning from one model to the next? Anything else that's important to mention?
Nora, if I can just add one point, I would say centralization is not the ultimate goal for every organization. There are organizations where it does not make sense to go centralized, and that so I do want to be clear, although we said there's a lot of pros, there are, but it also goes back to the culture and the goals of the organization, and you have to match that. So while centralization is great, hybrid can be great and just as fulfilling, and get you to that place of supporting the business where you need to be. The only one I would say is not going to be able to scale is the decentralized. I don't think you're going to be able to get there with that, but I just want to say that there's some flexibility. It doesn't have to be one versus the other.
Nice. Thanks for pointing that out. If
Mhm.
people on our webinar today are listening and they might be in one type of model and they feel the urge to help their organization move forward, what are some of the biggest challenges that you have seen when you want to transition from decentralized to hybrid or hybrid to centralized? And how can we proactively navigate those challenges? And maybe Sid, could you kick us off?
Sure. Yeah, I can't highlight change management enough. I feel that that is super important in any organizational change across the board, but especially in resource management, since it touches on so many different departments and so many different individuals within the company. So I have seen changes fail due to lack of change management, lack of buy-in from the company. If you don't have buy-in from top down, it won't be a success. For me, I try to really get a sense of the overall company goal and vision, and speak to that. I also try to mimic any reporting or resource management functions against other departments. Like I'll mimic the reporting against finance or HR reports, so that people get the same type of view. We can speak the same sort of language, and really get buy-in. I feel that if you don't have that, if you don't have the change management piece, it will likely fail or take a lot longer to really get the change to happen.
Yeah, yeah, well said. Thank you so much. And I love the idea to mimic reports of other departments to speak the same language. That's very clever. Andrea, I know that you're very passionate about change management as well. So I bet you have an awesome advice for us on that end.
Yes, I think change management is regardless of what process you're in, what model you're in, where you're at in the RM maturity, if you don't have a change management plan, it's pretty much not going to happen. You're not going to move through. And I don't mean that always in the traditional sense of change management, like, hey, everybody, we're going to go from phase 1 to phase 2. I really mean that in understanding how to communicate with different stakeholders. That's kind of what I come from change management, because one group or one department might have one goal and this is how they're going to get there using resource management. So a one size fits all approach does not work typically in the change management process. And so for me, I get super passionate about talking to people about, like, yes, it's great from the leader, the CEO, to Sid's point, to make sure that they're voicing this is what we're doing and this is why it's important for the organization. But then that cascading messaging needs to be the what's in it for me, to those folks that you're speaking with at every level of the organization, because then folks are bought in. They understand why this change is important and they understand how it impacts them. And they kind of want to be part of that change. And so even when you have detractors, those folks still are asking questions to make everyone better. So for me, that change management, it's the communication, it's multiple different, it's hard, right? It's a hard thing to do. It's getting to all those different stakeholders and really thinking through how that impacts them.
Very, very nice. Thank you. And I just want to invite everyone to give a thumbs up to the questions that you like the best so I can prioritize them. And I think Kay Brown's question, thank you so much, Kay, maybe fits in quite nicely. So Nikki, if I can kind of kick off with you, and you can also add any change management tips and tricks along the way. Kay is asking, what are the best practices for managing stakeholder expectations and buy-in during a transition between these models?
First, can you hear me?
Correct. Ah, not anymore. Sorry. It's a very moody microphone today.
Sorry. Is now better? No.
You're a bit far away.
How about now?
Hmm.
How about now?
I think it
No.
works. Let's try.
Okay. I'm so sorry. I've never experienced this before. But I mean, honestly, Andrea completely hit the nail on the head. Everything she touched upon really speaks to this question. For me, and I use this in our practice session, right? It's using your sales hat. Put your sales hat on. What is the benefit coming out of this? And make them a part of it, honestly. I know that's hard to do. You can't always take everyone's opinions, right? But really have engagement, right? Have that external, internal engagement. See what's important to people, see how people want to be a part of the transition. And maybe there's other folks in the organization who have done it before. And you may have never known that had you not reached out. So even learning from others' experiences and benefiting off of what they've done or what they, know and recognize. I just really think truly communicating the why, Andrea also mentioned having that leadership engagement. So really getting leadership involved, and it not just one time, but consistently out there saying, hey, this is what we're doing and why. Here's
Yeah.
this team and what their goals are and how they'll benefit you. And we're really excited about it, right? It's being positive about the change too. So again,
Yes.
that wearing that sales hat, get in front of different people you've never met before, just have those conversations, learn about the resources and show that you care.
Nice. Yeah, well said. Nothing to add from my side. Thank you so much, Nikki. Maybe you can grab some headphones. That could be a nice way of maybe dealing with the mic. And I'm just gonna pick the next question for you, Sid. How do you maintain a centralized model as a business grows at pace, especially if one area of the business grows quicker than another? Holly is asking. Thank you so much, Holly.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that that's a benefit of having a centralized model. Usually, having a centralized model, you can proactively get ahead of that, and see that change coming ahead of time, and really, have the insights to guide the business, when that big change comes. Partnering with talent acquisition or HR, I think, is really important, to really understand and have them get a sense of the hiring needs. Managing your capacity and demand, will hopefully guide you to that place where you then see the need coming and then can reach out to your talent acquisition team. I have managed a resource team where we actually had to shift and move part of our team, to scale for a group that was growing in a larger way. So that's the beauty of having a centralized team as well. You do have the group that can sort of move with the business as they're growing and shifting. So I don't know if that really answers the question, if there's more detail there, but um, having that centralized team is really going to aid in higher growth, for sure.
Very nice. Thanks so much, Sid. Beautiful answer. I'm going to pick the next one for you, Andrea. Rachel is wondering, do you think being a global company impacts the feasibility of having a truly centralized model? Thank you so much for the question, Rachel.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't think so. I would say the impacts might be that you are centralized by country or by continent. For example, you might have a centralized North America team, but you might also have a centralized Asia Pac team. And so they're centralized at the country or continent level. That might be a way. And then there's some type of interconnection. So I've had this before where there's a global contact at each continent. And so, for example, if I'm in North America, but I need someone in Africa, for example, I would then reach out to that Africa contact. They would have the network because it's centralized. They could make sure that they are farming that out to the right resource manager to quickly get to a resolution or solution on that resourcing need. So that's kind of how I've seen it approached in a positive way. Now, to have everyone and globally in one system, I think is pretty challenging. I would probably say that no technology, resource management technology is there yet to hold that entire, could be hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of folks. But I do think having it by either continent or country is a great way. And then when you have a centralized model, what I have set up in the past is kind of like points of contacts for specific things. Like someone owns the recruiting, point of contact, and you would have that same point of contact for global, for example. But I don't think it's a hindrance. I just think it's a little bit of a difference.
Nice. Any additions from you, Sid or Nikki?
I think for me, it's just really making sure that your skills matrix is up. I have seen and have been involved in, um, a resource management team where each person was assigned to like EMEA or APAC, but heavily relying on that skills matrix to assign the right resource was key.
Yeah, again, the importance. Check out our webinar if you're interested in the topic of skills management, which is so crucial. I love that topic. Thank you. Nice. Nikki, are you back with us? You want to give it a shot?
To shuffle things around. Did this work?
Yes,
Yay!
loud and clear. Winning.
I'm so sorry about that. No, it's hard to follow up with, after both Andrea and Sid, I definitely recognize the importance of skills. Especially if you need languages. So if it's language specific, needing to house that information somewhere to recognize, is this person bilingual? Do they speak, a certain language to meet the client need, regardless of the location? But really having points of contacts in different areas is critical. So whether you're utilizing, one system and have all the data at your fingertips, or if you're not, to Andrea's point, if different locations are using different resource management systems, being able to have visibility, whether it's through another team member or into that system, is critical as well.
Very nice. Awesome. I'm just curious, has anyone of you ever seen like a completely global resource management approach? Literally unified, super centralized, you might say. Nikki,
Yes,
you're
Yeah.
yes, I've
Yeah.
actually worked in one. Mhm.
wow.
I mean, yeah,
And
same here.
how was that experience? Is this something you would recommend to organizations and their RM functions?
I
I would say
actually,
absolutely. Sorry, Sid.
yeah, no, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it. I don't think it really even matters on the size of the organization. I've seen it work in a very small organization where you have that truly centralized resource management function. The intake process might look a little bit different. You need a little bit more information depending on which country or continent it's coming from. But really developing that relationship, especially with the BD team or the program team, the leader, right, of those various countries or continents, really just having that communication with them and being able to meet their time zones is important. That might be, the hard part about it, but honestly, the larger organizations definitely benefit from having that structure that Andrea outlined.
Very nice. Thank you for your experience, Nikki. Sid, anything you want to mention on top of that?
Just the standardization was kind of key when I was in that capacity, making sure that resource management was standardized across all countries, and that we were following the same workflow. And then I would meet with the leaders in each of those countries on a regular basis to really get an understanding of any pros and cons that they're seeing on their side so that we could continue to evolve in our standardization to really meet the needs across all time zones. As Nikki said, that was huge.
Yeah, wow. That's super inspiring. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Cool. So next we've got Charlie asking a question. Thank you for your question, Charlie. How do you overcome company leadership overriding the resource team's decisions? I see you nodding. Andrea, you want to kick off?
Yes, it's my favorite question. Um, so this is where you know that trust is not there, unfortunately. But it's the clear sign that there's a disconnect between the business and the resource management team. And this is no fault of anybody's. This typically has happened over time. So Charlie, no, not a reflection of you or anyone who has experienced this, because I have as well. But it means that you need to have a conversation with, if you're the leader of the resource management organization, there needs to be a real conversation with the leadership team. What this overriding is happening, and so it's taking the power away from the resource management team and really making them ineffective. So the conversation needs to be had of, why is this happening, kind of from their perspective. This is a listening exercise only, like no feedback, no, just truly listening to the leadership team to understand why they want to take this approach and why they feel like they have to take this approach. Because typically you'll learn a couple of things. One, it all ties back to trust, but you'll learn that, hey, the RMs that are doing this work, they're not assigning the person that we think. Or two, there's a high performer or the high performers that are constantly being pulled in and like burnout is happening. And so again, before you go in and say like, oh, well, you're burning this person out, just be a sponge and just listen and give them that space and opportunity. And then I think that gives you a perfect opportunity to go back and craft an amazing business case to be able to say and provide some suggestions of change.
Beautiful. I love the sponge analogy. Go and be a sponge.
Yes, be a
Awesome.
sponge.
Thank you, Andrea. And
Yes.
Sid, I saw you nodding a lot too at that question. Any additions?
Yeah, I feel like this could be a topic in and of itself.
Mhm.
Uh, I find that this does come up in resource management quite a bit because resource management does sort of sit at the center of a lot of the organization. I typically call it Grand Central Station, but they may not be treated as such, right? And it sometimes comes down to control. People don't want to give up, their sense of control to resource managers and the team. So yeah, I've had to sort of sit in this seat quite a bit, and I think a lot of resource managers can relate to this. Um, I completely agree with Andrea. There's a lack of trust going on somewhere in there. I've done listening tours, again, to Andrea's point, listening tours across the organization where I really just sit and listen to the misses, and then kind of design those back into the company vision and goal, and speak that back to the leaders. I've also done sort of visual training sessions as well. Like in a perfect world, this is what we do. From point A to point B, this is what it looks like, and really get buy-in that way. Just doing like a video of the workflow. So different ways to build trust, but I think trust is key here.
Yeah, nice. Awesome. Thank you so much for your experiences. Next up, I would like to pick Holly's question. So Holly is saying, I'm the only resource manager at the moment at my company, working in a weekly resourcing group with partners, department leads, and HR, where the final decisions get made. I'm looking to grow the function, so I'm interested to know what a centralized model looks like with more than one resourcing professional. Who wants to take this one?
I'm happy to jump in here. I would say as you're adding resource professionals, add it in the way that it makes sense for the business. And what I mean by that is, so if it was two of you and you added someone else, break it up of how that manages the P&L, like so that you are providing, you can tag onto the leadership that owns the profit and loss for that particular group or groups that other RM is going to be aligned to. Sometimes I've seen in RM, like you're like, well, all these people should be grouped together, but that's not how the business is grouped. And that also leads to a little bit of a distrust, and then people get confused. And so if you align with the business and split groups by how the P&L owner or the practice owner or however your business is aligned, that also makes sense. And it also kind of garners you some trust with the leadership. They're like, okay, they understand how our business works and this makes sense to us. They can follow your logic. So I would say as you grow the resource management team, make sure you're following the business. And I also think it's super important to have almost like a definition of what resource management is at your organization for those RMs to come in and have like a core mission statement to be able to follow. So onboarding the RMs, onboarding the business, I think are two super important things, and following the business is super important.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andrea. Nikki, I saw you unmuted yourself too. What would you like to add?
Honestly, it was basically the same thing Andrea said. The way I've seen it done is whether you're set up as an RM by various business unit, or even client base, or service line. Even you really need to stick to assignments that make sense for the organization, but also work together. There are shared resources. Working together as a team, making decisions as a team, not done in a silo, and just building out that trust within those organizations is critical. To Andrea's point, having that strategy, whether it's in a charter documentation or whether it is truly by job title, having very, descriptive job titles as well is very helpful, and working together to understand and maintain different processes and governances behind the resource management strategies.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Nikki, for your additions. And it's so lovely to hear you clearly because it's so
I'm
good.
so sorry.
And Andrea, you actually prepared a little gift for everyone watching this webinar. And I would love for you maybe to just quickly mention, what is this decision matrix? How can it help people? So to everyone, you will get this at the end of the webinar. So what is this?
Yeah, it's just a checklist. So there's 3 different checklists that you'll receive here. And it's just for you, if you're trying to figure out like where you are today or where you want to go in your target state or future state, this is just a checklist for you to kind of just quickly see where you would fall. So if you're looking at your resource management maturity and you're high, you would check that box. You have standardization needs. They're high and they're consistent. You check that box. If it's not checked, that means you're probably not in the centralized model. So this will give you a good framework of like, where are we at today? And then I would go back and do it again and do a checkbox of like, where do we want to go? And then that kind of helps you understand, because some people think they're in a centralized model. And actually, when you go down and look, you're like, maybe we're not so much centralized. Maybe we're in this hybrid place. So, but just maybe like a gut check, I would say, to help you kind of sort through what that might look like and all the different aspects within the maturity.
Awesome. What a beautiful gift to the resource management community. So thank you very much, Andrea.
Sure.
Get this in our follow-up email. Thanks to Andrea. And I'm super excited to share with you that in our next upcoming session, we've got the beautiful, lovely Jenna Lemon joining us with basically how Eisner Amper saved $7.6 million with resource management. So stay tuned for that on the 22nd of July. We're very, very happy to welcome you then. And this is basically the end of the session, which is incredible because the time just flew by. Nikki, Sid, Andrea, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for another incredible webinar. It's been super insightful. It's been super fun. It's been just so lovely listening to you, sharing from your very lived experience. So thank you, thank you, thank you for today's session. It's been a joy.
Been amazing.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Nora.
This is always so fun. Thank you, Nora.
Fantastic. And feel free to reach out to all 3 of them, connect. Let's grow the resource management community even further. Thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, we really hope you took a lot away and have a beautiful rest of your day.
Sure.